Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5. I'm now a registered therapist, author, and mental health advocate. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maillard. How you doing, Duck?
Do you want the podcast answer or the honest answer?
Well, you know I'm going to give you the honest answer after this, so please.
Well, even before what you're about to hear about, my answer was going to be terrible. I've had a terrible week.
Really?
Yeah, just work, the things that we've talked about on this podcast before, me, the failure of thinking I did a good job and then not getting a job, stuff with my family, like my son's 2 weeks into summer vacation, and, we're all at each other's throats and I'm reacting this. And then I'm not making a suicide joke on a mental health podcast, but it looks like I had an attempt. I burned myself on an air fryer.
Oof.
And it's terrible. It's just been a terrible week. And so we'll talk about it later in the podcast. This was something I was looking forward to because it's a positive, like, creative outlet for me. But up until today, it's been pretty awful, to be honest.
So to add insult to injury,
yeah, that's right.
We just finished recording a little, was it an hour or a little
about
over
an hour?
About an hour of conversation with a wonderful person, Kalina Silverman, our guest on this episode. And as we're shutting things down and checking all the cameras and everything, I go to my computer and find that the audio cut out and shut down 17 minutes into an hour-long interview.
Now, for those of you who don't know, for Ryan, this is a fate worse than death. Audio is his life. So this is a very traumatic moment, and we're working through it in real time.
Well, it's not just that audio is my life. It's just that I don't know what it is. Probably my biggest pet peeve is when things don't work the way they're supposed to work. It's the thing that aggravates me more than anything. I mean, I'm sure there are things in life that would cause me more consternation than that, but it makes my blood boil when I'm doing everything, I think, right? And then something happens.
You didn't live up to your end of the bargain.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just
tools.
It really wasn't consternation as much as just a deflating feeling when you look at it and you're like, oh no. And so essentially, I think what we're going to probably have to do is use the audio from the iPhones that we're shooting this with. Thankfully, that records audio as well.
Right.
So we have something we can use, and hopefully it doesn't sound terrible. It's probably going to sound a little echoey in here because there's high ceilings in here. It's a studio that's kind of live sounding. You can hear, the reverb in here.
So be forewarned. We've got 17 minutes?
So yeah, 17 minutes into the actual interview, it's all of a sudden probably going to switch to sounding like we're having an interview in a
silo.
Yeah, well, let's say at a church.
Sure.
Right? In a church.
Well, we were preaching, testifying, so it's apropos.
So anyway, enough said about that. We're not going to let that ruin our day, if it hasn't already.
We talk about, looking forward to this. I do look forward to this as an opportunity to be honest with you in terms of not feeling like I have to be, hey, we're great, it's a podcast.
Yeah.
Like, specifically doing a mental health podcast, I think it's helpful for listeners and viewers to see me come in and say I've had a terrible fucking week, and I don't need to sugarcoat it and pretend that everything's fine.
So is it stuff that you want to talk about, or is it just you wanted to get it off your chest that you're...
It isn't stuff that I am confused about, like, why is this happening? It's stuff that we've already talked about a lot in the podcast of like, I do really great auditions. I work really hard, and then nothing comes of it, or something comes of it that's like, you might get it. They dangle the carrot, and I keep getting emails from my agents. They're like, you're still in the mix. We're still waiting to hear. Now, as of the time of this taping, the thing that I've been waiting on is still in the mix. Now, who knows? So the next time,
hence the mustache.
Hence the mustache. Yeah, the little teaser is that the mustache has long been for this one project that I've been that I auditioned for, and then I get called back, so I have to go back to the mustache. I had a beard for an episode or two, and it went back. So, all that being said, it could come back to being a great thing, and it will have been worth the anguish. But right now, I'm going through it, and the stuff with my family is stuff that in our first episode we talked about. I don't have an issue with. I hope I don't have an issue with, like, rage, but I do get too angry because things build up. So yes. If somebody leaves something out once and I react disproportionately to it, like, oh, you left the water out again. It's not because of that one time. It's because of the 700 other times that I've asked, let's just say it, my son to put his water away or something. And so my reaction is appropriate for those 700 times. But for him, he's going, why are you so mad that I left my water out? You know? And it's something that I need to work on, keeping things in that perspective. Like I said, being 2 weeks into summer break with no camp or anything, his camp starts next week. But so we've all just been together in the house and it's starting to get hot. So we don't go out as much and we, try to do evening walks and things. So I understand all the reasons for it. So it's not like I need to have you break it down for me, but it's still good to get it off my chest and admit it and say, for the sake of posterity, son, I know that I'm being harsh and too reactive. So I apologize when you listen to this in 5 years when you're old enough.
Is this just like an emotional regulation thing? Like you just get to a point where you're aggravated and it comes out in that way? Or is it triggering something in particular?
It triggers in me because I'll tell you, when I start to lose control a little bit and start to rant and rave, it stops being about the water and starts being about when I always go back to, no one listens to me. And I feel disrespected by my family. My wife gets it too. Sorry, honey. That I feel like, why do I bother? Why do I bother saying these things when I'm just going to be the one that has to wash the dishes the right way or clean up the house or, and even just talking about it now, I get that same frustration feeling of like, no one hears me. No one says, wow, this is really important to Dad. I really should focus on that. Now he's 10. He shouldn't have to internalize stuff that much. But that's the reaction for me. It's sort of it goes much deeper than the bottle of water or the food on the plate. It's about, why does no one take what I say seriously? Why does no one understand how important it is to me and that I've said it 500 times, and so the 501st time I'm going to snap.
So when was that an issue for you in the past, and what developed that trigger for that?
It wasn't an issue when I was younger. I think it's been in recent years. Having a child is a struggle in terms of wanting to apply adult thinking to a child, a juvenile. Especially hard when your son he's an old soul. People say that about kids. He's very nurturing, as an open heart, and so a lot of times we were able to have bigger conversations with him when he was 4 and 5 than you would have expected. Unfortunately, I think that sets an unrealistic bar for me to be like, well, now he can help with his taxes. I don't have to do his taxes for him, And so I think it's something that's come on in recent years, a combination of, having the life that we've had. COVID was a huge part of it. We were all at each other's throats during COVID, as I'm sure everybody was. And, just the strike with the union and stuff. No, I'm not working. My wife's not working as much. So tensions are running high. And so I think there's a part of me that just wants to be heard and respected and be like, we hear you.
So feeling unheard wasn't something that you experienced earlier in life?
I mean, it probably was subconsciously, in that my parents were going through a divorce, and but I had great teachers and I had great people who were looking out for me. Okay. So no, I don't feel like I was ever screaming into the void and being, why won't, sir, I exist, and the universe says I did not feel compelled to acknowledge.
So it's a confluence of things, feeling agitated in general in terms of things that are challenging in your life.
It's a lot of like what you say about like things not working as they're supposed to.
Right.
I think there's a little bit of, this isn't how this was supposed to be. Okay. I'm supposed to be a dad who says, pick up your clothes. And then my son goes, okay, Dad. And he picks up his clothes. And now he's learned that lesson. And I don't have to go over that lesson again. And it not happening makes me go, what am I doing wrong?
So is it age appropriate for him? Is there?
Of course.
I mean, when you look at him, is he somebody? I mean, does he have ADHD or something? No, it's just.
My wife reminds me we have it so good. He's not emotionally fraught. He's a great kid. He's not shoplifting. He's not setting things on fire. He's a great kid. The biggest problems we have is that he's a spaz. He's 10 years old.
Yeah.
He drops things. He threw a penny in the air conditioning vent in my car, and I lost my mind.
Yeah.
All I could think of was David Spade and Tommy Boy. I'd be like, the M&M's in the
that really helps the resale value.
Exactly. Grand scheme of things, our Nissan Rogue is going to be fine. But I lost my mind.
So is it just a tipping point for you? Is it like you've had 8 different things that are pushing you to a point of being really frustrated and or your own insecurities coming up in terms of things not going exactly the way that you want to, and so you start asking like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And then the thing that you care about most, I'm assuming, your family and how you are.
Oh, I thought you meant my Nissan Rogue. I love that car.
Yes.
It's my wife's car, to be honest.
And the resale value.
Right.
Of
It's through the.
No. So, when you ask yourself, like, what am I doing something wrong as a parent, as a father, then it's just kind of like the breaking point of all of those frustrations.
Yeah. But I think I have noticed that it's gotten worse in recent years. And my wife, like I said, she bears the brunt of it too. And I say it to her, I feel like she doesn't listen to me or respect my wishes, because the things that I have to say, whether they're jobs that I do because she doesn't do them well. And, I mean, it's just an unfair and overreaction on my part, and I can acknowledge it. But in the moment, I can't stop it. In the moment, I feel so indignant and I feel so disrespected and so, I feel I'm at the end of my rope. But the problem is I get to the end of my rope so much sooner these days.
Have you ever heard of DBT, dialectic behavior therapy? It's a very laid out formulaic sort of program for dealing with emotional regulation and distress tolerance, being able to tolerate distress. And it's a mindfulness based program in which you kind of discover ways to pause before reacting.
Like counting to 10, like something as simple as that.
It's something as simple as that sometimes, but it's there are people that obviously have a lot harder time with these things than you're describing in terms of like they lose it on a dime, they become enraged in a way that is just totally unreasonable.
I would hope I'm not to that stage. I don't think I am.
Well, I mean, I would think that I would have seen something like that.
There'd be marks on my, I burned myself on the air fryer.
But we all experience that to some degree. It's a matter of, we're all on a spectrum in terms of our tolerance for things that are distressing and how we react to them. But mindfulness, I find really helpful just as a way of responding to things as opposed to reacting to things. We have a choice. We don't have a choice in terms of the world around us and what it presents us. Things don't always go the way that we want, but we do have a choice in terms of how we respond to it, as opposed to, this isn't the end of the world. It may feel like it to me emotionally. And so you have to deal with that emotional trigger that's going on. But there are tools to utilize to recognize and to work on. There are other avenues to go down in that moment.
Can you give me any of those at this time?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people look for a fix to like a panic attack or a moment when you're having a freak out. I always say it's better to be proactive than to be reactive. If you're meditating and you're working on an approach to mindfulness on a daily basis, then when those moments come, you have the capability because you've been practicing.
I'm ready for it.
You've been honing that skill so that when an axe is coming at your head, you can be like water, to borrow the Eastern philosophy. You react to it in a way that you're moving away from it rather than trying to hit it head on, which is not going to, end well. You're going to fail. You're going to be defeated by that axe. But if you can move to the side and use the energy of it moving towards you to let it go past you, it's a strategy of martial arts. You look at a ninja and the way that they approach an attacker. You use their strength and their energy against them, and that's kind of like water finds its form around whatever's going through it and whatever's whatever direction it's flowing. It'll go around the thing that's in the middle of the stream. It'll find its way and it'll find its balance.
Right.
We have the capacity to do that, but it's not something you can do in the moment when you're being triggered by something extremely frustrating. Right. It's something you cultivate over time with practice, finding that center and finding the way in which you're most present and most connected to the fact that, most of the time, nothing really terrible is happening. Every now and then terrible things happen. But most of the time we're not being chased by a tiger.
Strangely enough, I'm better in those moments. I'm very cool under extreme pressure. If something goes really wrong, a car accident, a family member's sick, I go into, all right,
in a crisis.
In a crisis, I'm much cooler and much calmer.
That's interesting. And that is common of people who grew up in a situation in which there was crisis a lot.
Yeah.
I remember you describing sort of being parentified, having to step in and be the one who was the peacekeeper, the one who's kind of tending to your mom's sensitivities after your dad with his alcoholism.
Mhm.
And so you kind of probably adopted that skill set pretty early on, that when there is a crisis, that you feel actually that's a comfortable role for you.
Yeah.
You step in, you know how to put out the fire and be in charge in that moment. Um, and it's interesting. A lot of people go through their whole lives like that, and are even attracted to chaos in
Mhm.
relationships.
Because it's something to do. I know how to do this.
Yeah, I
So
feel
I can
like I'm
put out
at
those
my
fires.
best
Yeah.
when I have a fire to put out. Of course, that does take a toll on you in time if you're always the person who's putting out fires and you're always finding more fires to put out,
Mhm.
because you're just running on stress all the time. Your level of adrenaline and cortisol can be toxic over time. But that's another way in which the mindfulness approach helps, because it lowers your overall stress. It allows you to de-stress. And then when those things happen in your life, you're not reacting to it with adrenaline and cortisol and like, because in those moments when something happens, you're probably almost dissociating. You're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to a state where you're just focusing on what needs to be done, and all of your other resources that might tend to your needs are out the window.
Mhm.
So then you, for whatever time you're doing that, you're using all your resources to solve that problem, and then you're left depleted after that.
Yeah.
Often, I don't want to put words in your
No,
mouth.
no, no. Definitely.
So what happens is, if you find a way to be more centered and balanced, that when things happen, you don't have to go into that fight or flight kind of place, then you respond to them in a way that's more even keeled, and then you return back to center more readily,
Yeah.
rather than having extreme highs and lows. And that in time translates to not reacting to things out of hand,
Yeah.
and having more emotional regulation and tolerance for distress. It's something. And look, I talk about this as if this is something that I've accomplished, like I'm a Zen
Well,
master.
I was going to say your response to finding out the audio didn't work was very, very calm and even. I mean, I was impressed. I would have been throwing a keyboard or something.
Yeah, I would
you know?
say that I have found my center and balance in that. I would say that what I experienced was a sinking feeling.
Mhm.
If I'm being honest, it was mostly the emotion I was feeling was I let all of you guys down.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. My main issue is just like being the overachiever, getting a lot of congratulations for my accomplishments. It's not a comfortable place for me to fail at something.
Yeah.
And it was like, that is other than hosting the show and having a good conversation today, my one job from a technical standpoint is to make
Get
sure
the
that the audio sounds good, and at the very least is recording.
Right.
So
There's the bare minimum.
So when I saw that, I was like, I saw the little thing that said CPU power outage. I was like, oh God. And I pressed OK, and I checked and I saw it ended at 17 minutes. It was just a sinking feeling like, oh, I failed at this.
Yeah.
And I wanted to blame it on the computer, and it's like, oh, damn computer. But I went to that slightly sunken space. But I do think that that is a product of the work I've done, in terms of like, there was a time in my life, especially when I was young, that when I was aggravated, and mostly it was disappointed in myself, that I would, throw my hat, or in baseball.
Yeah.
I've told you
We
about
talked
this.
about
Like, I was a very good baseball player, and usually I did succeed at a certain age. But like, when I would walk somebody in a crucial moment, and your first instinct as a 12-year-old is like, what are you doing at the umpire?
Yeah, right.
But then when I realized it was just me and I couldn't blame it on anyone else, I would throw my mitt, I would throw my hat, and that was just anger at myself coming out. Right? I've learned how to regulate that and realize, like, okay, this doesn't mean that I'm a failure. Because in those moments that you describe, you're angry at your son,
Mm-hmm.
but as you describe it, it sounds like you're kind of angry at yourself.
I'm just angry at the world, in that, like, and it's probably that sort of like, poor me. Why is everyone picking on me?
Okay.
But also in that, like, yeah, I must not have done a good job of making it clear how important it was to me. And no matter how many times I say it or how many ways I say it, whether I'm angry, whether I'm, trying really nicely it doesn't seem to be getting through. So yeah, it is a failure on my part to be like, I must not be making it clear how important it is that water gets into the sink. So,
I had a similar, I don't have kids, obviously, but I have dealt with someone with a very short attention span in my life. I talk about this in my book, so it's not a surprise to anyone that I'm talking about Adam Levine. I don't know if I blamed myself in that relationship, but when you were talking about it, it just rang a lot of bells for me.
Yeah.
Because he does have ADHD. I'm sure that I'm not around him on a daily basis like I was back then. I'm sure that he is, he's worked through that to a certain extent. But at 16 years old, when he was 14, and he would just, he'd come over my house and he'd go into the fridge and grab a soda. He'd crack it open, take a sip, put it down. We'd go play some music. He'd go back into the fridge, grab another one, crack it, take a sip, put it down. By the end of 3 hours, there'd be like 5 cans of soda around in various places around the house with 1 or 2 sips out of them. And it would just be, talk about consternation. It was just that feeling of just like, oh. Yeah. And I probably didn't handle it the best that I could.
Well, you were 16.
Yeah, but there was that just maddening feeling because I'm a control freak. I could be very OCD. And he's the opposite. He's very impulsive and very like just flighty in that way. And I think that it's amazing that we were as good friends as we were and that we appreciate each other as much as we did, because in some ways we were capable of pushing each other's buttons.
Sure.
Because to him, like the worst thing in the world was a tight ass. You know, he was like the fly by the seat of his pants kind of personality. And I was just like really wound up tight. So you would think like, God, that wouldn't be any fun for him. Yeah. Constantly reprimanding him on what he's doing wrong. And in the same way, it wouldn't be a lot of fun for me that I'm constantly having to clean up after somebody who is, would lose his right arm if it weren't attached to him. So I think I learned a lot from that experience. And I made a choice at a certain point in my early 20s in that relationship that like allowing those things to bother me to the extent that they did and to whatever extent I was internalizing them was just not productive. Yeah. And to find that Zen place of like, well, this is who he is. This is where he's at in his journey. I have a choice to either respond to this and laugh it off and just be like, oh, it's the way that he is. And I can't expect anything different. And just appreciate him for what other gifts he has and the wonderful things that he brings to my life. Or I can continue to just be frustrated all the time, in which case I'm making myself miserable. And so I think that was my first lesson in that, what I'm talking about in terms of responding versus reacting. It's like, I do have a choice in this matter in terms of how much this frustrates me.
I like the concept of choice, because I think a lot of us, when we deal with mental health issues, we sort of feel that we're at the mercy of the universe, or we're at the mercy of our phobias, our whatever. But it's something that, here comes the segue, comes up today in our conversation with Kalina, is that we can choose to, to focus on the positive. We can choose to make a choice that the next time this happens, I'm going to employ some of these methods to react or respond rather than react, know? And I think it reminds listeners that you're not helpless. You're not powerless against these things that feel like the end of the world. Sometimes it does just the first day of getting up and exercising, if you're out of shape and you want to lose weight, if you want to start making better choices with addiction, sometimes it's just, you've just got to make that choice. And that's not to oversimplify it and say like, all you got to do is decide to be happy, bro. But a lot of times reminding yourself that you can take that power back and say, I'm tired of living this way, whatever that means. And I'm going to make a change today. And maybe that is having this conversation with you will allow me the next time to not scream at my kids so much over something stupid, Well,
there's work to be done. It's, you make progress, not perfection, right? And you learn from the ways in which you're challenged, and you just meditate on the ways that you can be a little bit better at those things. And it's very common, like with clients, in particular with couples, and in relationships, you hear this every day in therapy, where somebody will say to you, oh, he does this thing and he makes me crazy. He doesn't understand how this makes me feel. He makes me so mad. Right. And my response to that is always, how does he make you feel that way? Is he reaching into your heart or your mind and making you feel that way? And the reality is, you do have a choice. You don't have a choice over their behavior. You can't change that person. You don't know necessarily how they're going to react in any situation, but you do have a choice in terms of how you're going to respond to it. And you do have a choice in terms of how you cultivate your response to it and whether it becomes a highly reactive emotional response, or if you're able to stop, take a beat, and think about it and realize I have some power in this situation.
Right.
I may not have power over you to control your behavior, but I do have power over how I respond to it.
That's why as a therapist, you encourage people to use I statements, right? Like when you do this, it makes me feel, not you make me feel guilty. When you do this, it makes me feel guilty, right? To take some ownership of your
Well, not
choice.
even it makes me feel, is when you do this, I feel.
Okay.
Because
right.
makes me feel is saying like I have no say in the matter.
Right.
Like you are literally like a puppet master that controls my emotions. And that's just not the case. It can feel that way. And it's not that I'm judging anyone who is reactive in that way. We all feel that way, that things that happen externally create an emotion. But usually the reason why that's happening is because we have a trigger.
Yeah.
Like there's some history to this. This has to do with other relationships we had in the past, formative relationships, or this is a pattern in our romantic or platonic relationships, or in this relationship in particular. You know, it's like oh, you always do that. Every time this kind of thing comes up, you say this thing that you know is going to aggravate me, and you do it, and it drives me crazy. And how do you expect me to respond? I lose my mind when you do that. And it's like, well, if you know it's coming, then you know you have a choice in terms of how you're going to respond to it.
Right.
It's like, why are you so surprised?
Yeah.
You know, in that moment, you have a choice to either respond in the way that that statement may have been designed to get that reaction out of you, or the choice to respond in the way that you would like to respond to it, in a way that may be more constructive. And we refer to it in the recovery community as keeping your side of the street clean. It's like you go through your life a lot. It's very common addict thinking. It's like, oh, well, the whole world is against me.
Right.
And it's like, what am I supposed to do? I remember thinking this a lot when I was drinking. It's like, well, if everyone knew like the shit that I go through, they wouldn't begrudge me how much I drink. It's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm miserable. And it's like, well, that's a choice I'm making. Like my life circumstances may be unfortunate, but I'm making a choice to make it worse. I'm reacting to that problem with a worse problem. Yeah. As opposed to taking a situation that may be unfortunate and trying to make it a little bit better. We have that choice in our behavior, in our thoughts, in our emotions, and in our relationships. We can't, again, change the other person, but we can be the person who is the model of the change we would like to see in them.
Yeah.
If you're the one who's acting in a mature way, you're keeping your shit together, and you're communicating your needs in a respectful and clear way, the other person is disarmed by that. They can't play their games anymore and manipulate.
I'm yelling because you're yelling. Well, if you don't yell, they can't yell back.
Exactly. Yeah. If I'm not yelling. So there's so much I feel like we could talk about this all day.
Honestly, it's very insightful. It gives me hope that like literally the next time this happens, I can go, huh? All right, Ryan. Like I remember that conversation with Ryan, and it's even if it just backs it down 10%, you know, at least it's progress towards dealing with it in a more healthy way. Well,
there are very simple, your original questions, there are simple techniques. If you take like an anger management program or something like that, I think the first thing they'll probably teach you is, you know, count to 5.
Right.
You know, if you feel that as strongly after 5 seconds
count
as
to 10.
you did. Yeah, no, but I mean, and if it's to the point where you literally can't contain yourself, it's like, go step out, get some fresh air, change your scenery, I mean, for me, like when I was in early recovery and you just got to find any way to get through a day without drinking, because that coping mechanism is obviously not working. It's like, what do you do when you've completely lost it?
Yeah.
When you feel so frustrated, whether it's down on yourself or aggravated with somebody else, or just so wound up with tension that you don't know what to do other than have a drink. It's like splash some cold water on your face. Go outside and go for a walk around the block and get some cool air in your face.
Literally just break the...
Change like whatever you're feeling in your body in that moment is consistent with the emotion that you're feeling. So if you change the actual physical feeling you're having in that moment, you have just enough departure from that emotion to let room for something else to come in.
Yeah.
Right. And so if the emotion is preceding the thought, even if it's just a trigger to something, and the emotion seems to come immediately, it's like, okay, well, take yourself out of that situation, create another physical space for yourself. And that way you can feel something different in your body.
It's good advice for like for a panic attack too, right?
Yeah.
Like this is physically to just change the environment a little bit so you can focus on that, and it's something new to kind of. Yeah.
Well, that's also kind of like where the somatic element comes in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like our bodies are a large part. There's no separation between the mind and the body.
Mm-hmm.
The cognitive approach describes that we have thoughts, and that's where the emotions come from. But oftentimes the feeling precedes the thought.
Yeah.
And we feel that tension rise in our body immediately when something triggers us before we even have a real cognitive reaction.
Sometimes I will feel, we talk about my anxiety, how I've more or less learned to deal with it. But there will be days when I wake up with, like a pit in my stomach,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't feel well, and I have to go, I've got an audition due in a day, and it's been weighing on me, and I know
Mm-hmm.
it. And the minute it's over, I'm like, oh, there it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that like you say, the physical sometimes precedes the mental.
And that's why, CBT is effective for a lot of things, and it's helpful if you have ruminating thoughts and you need to change those to more productive thoughts. But it doesn't really get to that somatic element.
Mm-hmm.
That's pre-conscious, right? We have triggers that are built into our nervous system, right? So if you're having a reaction, like for instance, PTSD, it's
Mm-hmm.
like you don't need to think when you hear a car backfire.
Right.
I'm in a war zone and that sounds like a gunshot or a bomb going off. And so I'm scared or I'm going to react. I'm hypervigilant. You're not thinking that.
Right.
You're having a physical, visceral reaction to that stimuli before you even have a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So the CBT is not going to work for that. It's been proven. PTSD just doesn't respond well to that kind of therapy.
Oh, interesting.
You need to get into the nervous system and find a way to find safety in your nervous system, because the trigger is actually activating something that's pre-conscious. And so that's why for me, I talk about it's like when all else fails, when I'm sitting there and trying to replace my thoughts with more productive thoughts, or I'm trying to calm myself down and breathe, and it's like sometimes I just need to get into a warm bath and literally feel my muscles relax. And that gives me the space for me to then think about where my intellectual mind is going wrong.
Interesting.
Or, I need to work out. I need to get my blood flowing a little bit to work out that tension in my body, or stretch and limber up. And there's a lot of somatic ways in which to tap into calm and safety in the body. And if you can establish a little bit of that, then you have more control over the emotional reaction that's connected to it.
Kind of some aha moments already here, you telling me that, which is, it's useful. And I think it's useful too, because I think our intro has gone a little bit longer than we normally have, but that's good in case maybe that audio is going to be completely useless.
That's what I've been thinking.
And we can use this as a little mini episode. And that leads me to reminding you all that if you have some questions or comments that obviously we check the Instagram and the YouTube comments all the time, but an easier way to get in touch with us is through our Gmail address, which is hardertobreathepodcast@gmail.com. Maybe if we get enough of a good collection of questions, from listeners and viewers, we could do an episode like this every now and then where we just kind of address those questions and talk to you guys directly. So be generous with your questions and don't hold back. Really tell us, tell me that I'm being too hard on my son, because I already feel like that's going to be the audience. Is Brian is really hard on his son,
No, but your willingness to be honest and vulnerable about it is, look, there's a lot of dads out there that are really hard on their sons, and they have no self-awareness about it. The fact that you are aware of it and working on it and wanting to improve in that regard puts you head and shoulders above a lot of parents. And so it's to me, that's admirable and it's courageous to talk about it in that way. So so this has been great for me, to have this kind of conversation. And I think that you're right. That doing that kind of thing where we take questions and do this kind of thing more often is probably going to be a great approach in the future. For now, I'm hoping and I'm praying.
If not, Kalina, we're really sorry.
Hopefully there's something usable in this. And but because it was a really great conversation with her. Kalina is wonderful. So without further ado, hopefully, here's our conversation with Kalina Silverman of the not brand but movement Big Talk, which is a big idea and a big mission. To improve the world in a lot of ways.
It improved the podcast. You might just not be able to hear it, but it definitely improved the podcast.
So here it is, our conversation with Kalina Silverman on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Kalina Silverman, welcome to the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, for the people who are listening to this, I'd like to introduce Big Talk to them because they may or may not know exactly what that is. Can you tell us what it is exactly, how it came about, and what you're doing with Big Talk today?
I'll present like Vanna White as you do it.
Oh, yeah, nice. Okay.
No, come on, say my first. I know how to present a product.
So Big Talk, very simple concept. It's all about skipping small talk to make more meaningful connections with people. And it started off actually as a video series almost 10 years ago. I had moved to a new city for the first time and was feeling really lonely and disconnected. And I didn't know why, because I was meeting people all the time, showing up at events, going to parties, but there's a lot of small talk. And one night I was having a pretty meaningful conversation with a friend. And I was like, wow, this is kind of the connection I've been missing. He was like, yeah, screw small talk. So I came up with the name Big Talk. And I was studying documentary film at the time. So I had the opportunity that summer to go to Germany to work on a documentary about the Holocaust, and Ecuador to work on one about education reform. In each country, we only had a few weeks, and we had to meet new people, get invited into their homes, get invited into government buildings, and create these like really intense connections really quickly. And as a result, we had so many serendipitous, amazing encounters. And I thought, wow, I really don't want to lose this magic of connection and travel and adventure and serendipity when I go back home. So on my last day in Germany, I saw a question written on the Berlin Wall, and it said, what do you want to do before you die? And I was like, that's Big Talk. So I came back to LA, and I decided to try out my own little experiment where I filmed conversations with strangers that I walked up to on the street. And I asked them, what do you want to do before you die? And I talked to little kids, I talked to the elderly, I talked to business people, I talked to people experiencing homelessness. It didn't matter. And what it came down to, what mattered most to people, one, fulfilling bucket list items like traveling and stuff. But what mattered most was our relationships and connections, and being with the people we cared about most. And that kind of changed my whole life. And I forgot to mention, I called the video Big Talk, and it kind of went viral. This is pre-TikTok, pre-Instagram days.
The good old days.
The good old days. Not that I'm that old, but and people started reaching out to me and saying, I want to join the Big Talk movement. And I was like, what? A movement? And so then I started making more videos and delivering workshops and events to people from all walks of life to help people make big talk instead of small talk. And I went to Singapore on a Fulbright research grant to research ways to use Big Talk to build empathy across different cultures. I've been working with populations ranging from the prison population to people with mental health disorders, to people with disabilities, kids, elderly. It doesn't matter. Anyone can connect through a deeper question. And I'll stop right there. I could talk forever.
I love the fact that the person who was making documentaries about the Holocaust and education reform felt the need to change, like that their life needed to change.
Yeah.
Like that's already quite an accomplishment and quite a resume. The fact
thanks.
that it was, you found something to step on top of that and go further is even more insulting to someone like me who just makes movies about furniture that can talk.
That's important too.
It was a really good movie. I made it when I was in my 20s. I'll show it to you sometime. Anyway.
So it sounds like Big Talk is a relatively simple idea in terms of just making big talk instead of small talk to make connections, but it sounds like a big mission.
Yeah. The mission behind Big Talk is to fight modern day loneliness, which is an actual public health issue. Even the US Surgeon General wrote a book about it. Build empathy across perceived differences that people might have about one another, which is reasons we have wars and horrible things going on in the world, and to build community, which is also something we really need forever, but also especially after COVID and everything. And it's something that a lot of people have forgotten how to focus on, especially with tech and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's also something that, just as speaking as a gentleman who's gotten older, it's hard to make friends as an adult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to kind of establish those core similarities with somebody where you go, you're into this band, I'm into this band, let's be best friends forever, which was all it took when you were 15. But now it's like, it's a lot harder to find those connections. So another good reason to try something like this.
For men in particular, I remember actually Leo and I were talking about this concept of men's sheds, that it's easier for men to connect working side by side or shoulder to shoulder. So for men, you can like sit at a bar and like look outward.
As
and,
opposed to face to face, you mean?
As opposed to face to face, yeah. So it's easier to connect based off an activity, like if you're playing sports side by side or watching sports at a bar, or whatever activity, working in a shed. So they started building these sheds that men could commune at in, I think, Australia or something.
Oh, wow.
That is very true. You know,
Yeah.
I think that for a lot of my life, I had male friends, but there was always a little bit of like a barrier
Yeah.
between me and my male friends in terms of like, as long as we were doing an activity that we could bond over, like talking about baseball stats or playing baseball,
Yeah.
and then later music for me, there was a connection that was real, but only went to a certain level, kind of surface, and it was external. You didn't really get into really deeper, more intimate kind of connections.
Yeah.
And I think that I enjoyed my female relationships more as a result because I was a sensitive guy.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the fact that you could have that level of intimacy even in a platonic relationship with. So I think that that's probably not unique. I mean, most men probably experience that to a certain extent and probably go through their life not ever having those kind of really intimate relationships. So
It's a running joke, you know, on the internet of like, you know, I went out to dinner with my buddy who's going through a divorce, and my wife will be like, "Well, how's he doing?" He'd be like, "I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
We didn't talk about
That's
it. Like,
so
you didn't
real.
talk about the divorce?" Be like, "No, we just talked about the Mets." You know, like
Yeah.
it's a joke, but it's based in a lot of fact, I think.
Yeah, I will say I've gotten a lot of messages from men in the military or veterans because those are such masculine environments where people aren't able to open up necessarily. So yeah.
So was making connections always easy for you and something you wanted to spread, or was this something you were having issues with in your own life that you wanted to work on?
It has always been easy for me, actually. I think there's this misconception that I created this because I didn't know how to make friends and I was lonely. I was able to make friends and I started a club, and this was, I mean, I'm talking about back in university when I started Big Talk, and I was in a sorority and everything, but I think going deeper was something I always craved. I remember like reading my diary from high school, and I wrote about how I could tell my life was pretty superficial and like that I cared a lot about things like clothes and boys and parties, but I didn't know how to dive deeper. So I think that was something I always wanted to unlock. And Big Talk helped me get there.
Now you mentioned university. That's very worldly of you. We say college in this country, right? I noticed in looking through all of your stats online that you started a coalition when you were in college at Northwestern, which, by the way, was a college that I thought about going to because I thought about going into journalism just as you did.
Yeah.
You started a coalition for, was it biracial students? Was that the?
It was just people who had mixed identities,
Mixed
whether
race,
it was,
right.
biracial, multiracial, different religions, different international backgrounds. I think they're called third culture kids. But yeah, we called it the Mixed Race Student Coalition, I think.
Okay.
Back in college, because I noticed that there's like always like the club for the Jewish kids, the club for the Asian kids, the Black Student Association, but it was hard to find a community where people could celebrate their differences and still be integrated. So I created one.
So is being of mixed ethnicity, is that a big part of your identity and part of the reason why you are interested in connecting cultures?
I think that's a really good insight. I think probably yes, that I've always felt like I've had one foot out. I could fit in anywhere, but also never fully fit in anywhere as well, unless I guess someone else is also half Chinese and half white / Jewish, which there are a lot of us, us Jewanese folks.
That's the official term.
Yeah. But growing up, I think half my friends were of mixed race identity or came from a different country. And I've always really connected with people who have a worldly view. And Big Talk is kind of a way to see a holistic picture of humanity, because I ask questions that anyone can relate to, no matter who they are, what they do, where they're from.
Ryan, you're of mixed.
You are.
Yeah. And
well.
I've been reflecting on this a lot more recently at this point in my life, because, growing up, my family the Jewish culture was kind of the predominant thing. We went to temple. We didn't really go to church. We went to temple. My brother and I were bar mitzvahed. And I don't know, for some reason, I think there was a certain amount of internalized anti-Semitism that I experienced because, everywhere I went, there were just stereotypes of what a Jew is that I didn't really want to be a part of. Yeah. And so I feel like there was a lot of encouragement to embrace that identity because I grew up in the west side of LA and there's a lot of Jews in west side LA. I went to school with a lot of Jewish kids. And so it would have been really easy to kind of own that identity. But for me, I kind of disowned it to a certain extent. And I hadn't really reflected on why.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't really lean into my Latin culture or ethnicity either because maybe the same reason, maybe internalized racism in that regard. Because I went to a high school where there were no Latin kids, and the only experience a lot of these kids had with Latin people were the immigrant, the help, right? They're gardeners, they're maids. And so I got the picture pretty early on that by embracing that culture, that was leaning into something that was looked down upon in the environment that I was in. So I kind of like leaned into this identity as I'm a mutt.
Yeah.
I'm a product of the Southern California melting pot. You know, the Latin American culture is a big part of Southern California. There's a lot of Jews in West LA, but I'm neither. I'm kind of just this mutt that's a mix of these identities, and I don't need to be one or the other. But I've been reflecting on, was that a rejection of my specific cultures and background, or was that the embracing of the fact that I'm mixed in that way? So I don't know if that resonates at all with your experience.
Oh, it totally does. I think I've always been proud to say mixed and not say one or the other. But now there's times where I'm scared of losing culture as well, because the future is going to be super duper mixed. Like in a few hundred years, like everyone's going to be a mutt of some sort. So how do we retain elements of our culture and where our families are from? That's something I'm starting to think about more now.
It might surprise you guys to know that I am not mixed. I am as pasty.
Irish?
I'm just everything where people are really pale and
So
white.
you're a mixture of
I'm
pale
French
white.
and Irish and British and French and Dutch in it. You know, I mean, it's everything.
French twice.
Everywhere where the sun doesn't shine, that's me.
But that's a mix.
But here's my point: is that a group like what you established at school
Yeah.
would go a long way towards helping a person like me who grew up with an unrealized white privilege of I fit in everywhere because I don't know what it's like to not be of a group. Because I said as sort of that white privilege of like, well, everybody looks like me except for the people that don't, and they can worry about themselves. I think it allows someone who hasn't experienced that feeling of being other to recognize, wow, there's a big group of people who they're their own group who feel, you know, now together they found each other, and I could possibly be a part of that as well. So it's inclusive, and it's also educational to a guy who might just be ignorant to what they didn't know was going on around them, you know?
Yeah. I think it's always fun to celebrate cultures and different identities.
Well, now you're this incredibly worldly person who goes around the world talking about big talk and facilitating conversations. What have you learned about, does the world seem smaller to you now? Does the differences in the cultures, are they more profound than you imagined, or what's your perspective?
Definitely smaller, and there's not that many differences. I feel like people are the same everywhere. Everyone has the same universal wants and needs. And speaking of world feeling small, actually, I just ran into a friend the other day who I haven't seen in a really long time. And he brought this girl with him, and he was like, we met in Thailand because we both realized that we knew Big Talk, and they both like followed Big Talk on Instagram. They realized they both loved meaningful conversations, and they're both of a different cultural background from a different country, and they met over there. I'm like, wow, the world really is small once you just realize everyone cares about connection and relationships.
So we first met at a California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists mixer.
Yeah.
Right?
Camped.
Which is the union that I belong to, and a friend of mine was hosting that event.
Sounds really laid back and chill.
Yeah.
It actually was. It was a picnic.
It was a picnic at the park that we play softball at now.
Yeah, Michelle.
And of course, me being a therapist with a bunch of therapists, I end up talking to the person who was the guest speaker and her videographer the whole day. So that was a fortuitous day to meet some new friends. The thing that struck me right off the bat about you is that you're just a very positive person. Like your mission statement for Big Talk and the way that you talk about it, there's just the light that sort of emanates from you in terms of like feeling like, the best parts of us are possible to be tapped into if we reach deeper into our understanding of people and connecting. So, I mean, I've gotten to know you a little bit better since then, but my question for you is like, is that you? Are you just this beaming light from the core of your being, or do you have a dark side?
We're here to find the darkness. Let's dig deep.
I definitely have have a dark side. I have nightmares, to be honest, since we're talking about mental health and everything. I have nightmares almost every single night.
Wow.
But by day, I am a sunbeam, I will say.
Yes.
And I think it's definitely something suppressed. I think we all have yin and yang, right? And I think it's more about what you choose to focus on and where you choose to place your energies. Like, I'm sure I have a lot of inner work to do regarding my nightmares. But I think everyone has gone through difficult things. And it's how you come out of it that matters. One big talk question I love to ask in every interview is, what has been the darkest experience of your life and how did you get through it? And everyone has an answer. Even especially the people who radiate the most light, I've noticed. There are people who I've been hesitant to even ask that question because they seem so positive. And I'm like, oh, you probably haven't been through anything. And then they'll open up about how they were suicidal at one point, or how they've lost multiple loved ones to cancer and other forms of illness. And it's just a reminder that we all have a dark side, including me. And that the people who radiate the most light it's sometimes because we've gone through difficult experiences and we want to either compensate for that, or we want to show the world that we can still be resilient and still bring positivity, because I think that's really important.
But is it a conscious choice for you? Like, if you wake up feeling a certain way, like, I don't have it today, but I've got to turn it on because it's helpful and helpful for me, but also the people that I'm going to be seeing today, they need to see me up and positive. Or is it something that just your default setting?
Oh, it's very conscious. Yeah. I think after going through that period of loneliness and depression in school, I've done so much work over the past 10 years to find the things that keep me positive no matter what. Like surfing, it's really hard to be unhappy when you're in the ocean in the sunlight. And I've met a lot of surfers who have discovered the same, or who've gone through grief and different things, and surfing saved them.
I'm very unhappy at the beach, only because I spontaneously combust. It's not a good place for me. But anyway.
We need to get you a big straw.
Your point is made. I understand.
Things like that. There's, positive mindset things you can do, like journaling. I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but like gratitude journaling really works. I used to, before bed, I would make a list and I would just call it good things and just write down as many good things as I could think of that from that day, or just in my mind at the moment. And I would recall these little things that I wasn't even aware of during the day, but later on reflected on. And that helped me get in a positive mind. I should start doing that again. Maybe it'll help with the nightmares.
There you go.
Things like that. Drinking water, eating well, just the usual health things. Mm-hmm. And then also always making a conscious effort to choose relationships over everything else. Like, I always choose people over work, whether it's family, friends, or a stranger on the street. Like, that's more important to me than anything else.
Let's say that again. Relationships are more important than work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Forever. Always.
It's funny. Sorry, that just reminded me. A nighttime ritual with my son used to be roses and thorns. We used to go through and talk about the best part of our day and the worst part of our day. And I remember thinking, as we did it, that sometimes it was hard to come up with a thorn. And we want to, because you want to play the game because he goes, well, I didn't like it when I got that toy taken away or whatever. But it reminds you kind of that maybe your day wasn't as bad as you thought it was. If you struggle to come up with a bad moment, maybe you should really be grateful and for all the roses and all the great things that you went through that day.
So this period that you talk about where you were in school and you felt loneliness and depression, was that the darkest time in your life?
100%. I remember that feeling of depression. I feel like this is the worst thing anyone could go through. When you feel trapped in your own mind and like there's no way out. And ever since then, I swore I would help other people not feel that way. And I've talked to so many people who have felt that way for various reasons. It can be anything as simple as just a transition in your life to going through grief or whatnot. But once I experienced that, even though at the time it was such an awful feeling, I'm really glad, because now I can empathize with people who've experienced all spectrums of struggle.
So was getting through it for you just a matter of time, or was there something specific that you did to get through it?
Time definitely heals everything. I started swimming, which I was talking about surfing earlier, and I remember that's where I could like cry underwater and no one would see me. I talked to people I cared about, and the moments that really helped were the Me Too moments, where you open up to a friend and someone else says, oh, I've also been going through that. I thought I was the only one. So those are the moments that really help you get through it. And that was also the inspiration for Big Talk,
Was that a specific, time, like as a freshman when you get to college for the first time, and there's a big sense of, homesickness and I don't belong here, I don't know anybody? Because I think that's a pretty common experience for
Yeah, it was so common. Like in hindsight, so many people go through it, and you hear horrible stories of freshmen or students committing suicide in school. Like it should never get to that point, and everyone's so ashamed to talk about it. So that is when that happened. And then the second time, ironically, was when I took a leave of absence to come home and work on Big Talk. And again, I was all alone, and again felt that darkness. But that time, I was able to get out of it quicker.
So is Big Talk, it's in the literature, you don't describe it as a mental health program or anything like that, but is it mental health based? Is that where you would put it? Or if not, then how would you sort of file it?
That's a really good question, because I've had so many people tell me what Big Talk is to them, and I've kind of let Big Talk be defined by that. And I never thought of it as a mental health thing. Mm-hmm. I thought of it as just like a tool or an idea that provides inspiration. But, I've had now countless people reach out to me. Most recently, a man who's in prison who was suicidal, attempted suicide 4 times. And he logged onto the prison program, and he said he looked up all the resources around suicide and mental health and depression. And he said they all felt really fake to him. Then he came across the Big Talk program, because I collaborated with a prison education program. And he said that was the one thing that gave him hope. It was like having real, meaningful conversations with the people all around him, and not just listening to some talking head. And I was like, wow, this is a mental health tool. I don't know if Big Talk's fundamental purpose is to aid in mental health struggles, but maybe it is. I don't know. For him, it was. So, but for some people, they use it on date nights. Mm-hmm. For other people, they use it at work. But I guess mental health is underscores everything in terms of our relationships and our to others and ourselves. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No. No, I noticed for sure that when we did it at that event, that we were having conversations very quickly that were much deeper than you would normally have. Granted, it was a room full of therapists.
I know, they were the best.
So it was something I guess we're kind of used to in that regard.
And were they self-therapizing in real time? You're like, well, what's my worst fear? Well, my worst fear, of course, is based on my father leaving. And
Oh, it was so easy. Not everyone's already done.
No one had to dig.
Yeah. But I will say Big Talk is almost like the intervention. Ideally, you would do Big Talk before anything negative comes up for you, because you've already been able to open up and self-reflect. And I think teaching something like Big Talk in schools for kids would be really important. Or in high school, when I felt like I was only caring about superficial things like grades, boys, whatever, clothes, that would have been really nice to have that before going to college.
Is Big Talk a brand?
I hate calling it a brand.
Okay. What bothers you about calling it a brand?
I think brand implies that you're trying to sell something, and that the intent is money. I don't know where I got that from, but that's my association with brand. I just call it a movement, I guess.
A movement.
Yeah. Considering that when I first created it, I started receiving all these messages from people worldwide who were like, this is how I made Big Talk in my life. People were like, this is how I did it in the army in South Korea. This is how I did it in the modeling industry in Germany. This is how I did it with my friend who was suicidal, things like that. People had taken it and made it their own. So that at that point, I called it a movement. I guess some would call it a brand, since you can buy a deck of cards, but I just don't like to think of it that way, because that's not my intention with it.
Well, that's very altruistic. Of course, we all live, in the reality of the world that we have to find a way to support the things that we do. And I'm in this transition now where I've set out for a life of service. I became a therapist and I wrote a book and really just wanted to advocate and help people. And but then realizing, if you can create greater income, you have a bigger platform, you have more power to reach people. So there is an extent to which it's not totally selfish to turn your project into something that is an enterprise of sorts.
Totally.
So I wonder how you straddle that line, because obviously you're getting out into the world, you're creating content, you're promoting this movement, which is wonderful. But how do you kind of navigate the realities of, at a certain point, is it a business? Is it something that you have to think about that way?
Yeah. So I'm a really not great business person. I will say that. I've had so many business people come up to me like, you could be making millions. And I'm like, but that's not my goal. But how I have navigated that, I have done a lot of different side gigs and hustles over the past decade, ranging from teaching surfing to babysitting to modeling to, I don't know, you name it. But the way I've made an income from Big Talks, I do think it's important to talk about how creatives survive. Is through speaking gigs, through selling card games to app. Recently I got offered a book deal, so I'll have to consult you about that. And the times where it feels the most pure, I will say, is when I've been offered a grant to work on Big Talk, like the Fulbright research grant. So it's not big money because it's government money, but it feels really pure and intentional because it's about helping the community. And that was about helping the global community. And then recently I got a grant from the city of Santa Monica to help my city. And that's been really cool because I've just been showing up to all these different kinds of events. Like I was at the mental health awareness event, at the Asian American event, at the Juneteenth event. And I brought a little Big Talk booth, and it's just so grassroots and so down to earth, and just talk to people who walk up and let them play Big Talk, let them make art, and just hang out with like people in my own community.
Could you talk a little bit about those grants and how you have utilized them and what they allow you to do, and maybe make connections that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to make?
Yeah. So Fulbright is a grant from the U.S. State Department, and they give people the resources to travel to another country for a year to work on a project. And the project I worked on was how to use Big Talk to build empathy across cultures. So I basically took a bunch of questions and tested them out with Singaporeans, with Bangladeshi migrant workers, with students, with the expat population, and figured out that, again, it comes down to really simple concepts of humanity that people can relate to no matter what they do, what their station in life is. And I chose Singapore because it's a really diverse country, but it's very stratified based on your kind of status in life and what you do. And the questions that like people related to were so simple, like, what do you find beautiful in the world? Or what's been your favorite age so far and why? Things like that. What gives you hope? And so that was a really cool project. And then I was able to take all those findings and come back and do workshops all over the world. It took me to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Australia, as well as right at home at the California Family Therapist Association with campers, a summer camper. Like, it doesn't matter who it is, what their age is. I can take this idea now, and it resonates because of the research I did in Singapore through that grant. And then the Santa Monica grant, what I did with that one was I just built this little wooden, not little, but medium-sized wooden structure where people are able to hang up messages of hope and write messages of hope to people who might have lost hope. And by creating this art installation, people can, see something pretty, come up, talk to me, make Big Talk. So yeah, it's all very grassroots.
And did that research help you streamline the questions in Big Talk that you're like, okay, well, this seemed to resonate no matter where in the world I was? Yeah,
totally. I worked with a translator too to find out what questions
wouldn't translate as clearly
people would understand across cultures. And the way I try to write every Big Talk question is that it's universal, so that anyone, no matter who they are, what they do, where they're from, would be able to answer it. And that it's an open-ended question. It's not just like a yes or no question. And then it's also really important, I think, to avoid politics and fact-based knowledge. Like, someone shouldn't have to know something or have expertise to be able to answer a question. You can answer it because you're a human.
Do you have a sense, if the overriding mission is the loneliness and disconnection that you're seeing in the world, do you have a sense as to what is causing that specifically? And do you incorporate that into how you're approaching addressing it?
Yeah, I think what's causing it, I don't want to sound like I'm an expert.
Please tell us, because we can solve all the world's problems right here.
I mean, it sounds so cliche, but technology and social media and people being able to look down at their phones. Like, now when I go to a restaurant and if I'm with someone, they leave to use the restroom, I try so hard not to just grab my phone. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to look around, maybe smile at someone, but I'm not going to look at my phone. But that's what people do now. They just look at their screens because it's so much easier than talking to someone. And also because of globalization, people leave their hometowns, their communities. So you don't have the whole, it takes a village way of raising people and connecting with people. So you have to be more intentional about how you connect and meet one another. And that's why I do Big Talk, because it's so intentional. So yeah, just the usual things you see as headlines in the New York Times, you know, are causing our global loneliness epidemic.
Part of the reason why I asked the question about, is it a brand, is because when you start a business, you have like a very specific goal. Like your goal is very, it's a big mission. There's a change you would like to see in the world. But it's like hard to know if and when you're going to accomplish that. So it's like, is there something tangible, specific that you're wanting to achieve that is like a marker of knowing that you've succeeded? Is that not the point at all? Am I missing the point? Is it just like every day I want to do something to help in this way, and as long as I'm doing that, I'm doing good work and I'm happy? Or do you have specific goals?
I have personal goals with Big Talk. I think the reason I have a lot of inner peace at this ripe old age is that I feel like I have achieved my goal of what Big Talk has intended to do, that it has set off this, now I don't have to do as much because enough people have had Big Talk in their lives that they introduce it to someone else, or it helps their relationship. Like every day now I receive a message or a text from someone who's like, thank you so much, this helped me with my husband or my estranged child, things like that. Like it feels like it's rippling through now, where I have achieved my mission of building a movement that helps people feel less lonely and connect. My personal goal, I would love to have a TV show. I have kind of a creative artistic goal around Big Talk for that. So that's something I still, want to achieve as, an overachiever who still dreams about calculus.
That's that was sort of my next question in terms of are there other components of the Big Talk? I'll call it a movement, not a brand, because we don't want to in terms of that's beyond just the cards. Are there other components to it, like you said, whether it's a seminar or something that can take it to the next level?
Yeah, the existing components, right? There's the cards, the workshops, seminars, the videos I make. I still go out like almost every day and interview strangers on the street and post these videos right now just to Instagram. But the dream would be to create a show that features people all over the world, all walks of life, all commenting on the same universal subjects. Like love, loss, hope, grief, everything like that. And also to create an educational program that we would teach in schools in the same way that we would teach calculus, because it's so important to learn empathy and relational skills. So those are the two big things that I'm still working towards in the Big Talk universe.
Amazing. So I feel like we probably should
we'd be missing a huge opportunity if we didn't at least pull out a card or two.
Okay,
you tell me how we're going to set this up.
Okay, so this is Big Talk, everyone. So first, I like to take it out and put it in vertically so it's easier to grab some. And then everyone should grab a little stack.
Okay.
I always recommend grabbing a stack. So not every question is going to resonate with everyone.
Gotcha. Is that enough?
Sure. Yeah. And then look through them and choose the question that you like the most, that resonates with you, and either answer it yourself or ask it to the group.
All right, I have one. I'll start us off.
Go for it.
Okay. And you can either answer it or post it.
I think I'll present it, answer it, and then
post it.
Pose it because it's an easy answer for me, and it's going to sound cloying and lame, but it's not. What's the best part of your day / week, month, year? But I'll do day, and I mean it when I say it. It's doing this podcast.
Aww.
Ryan and I have talked about it that since we started this, having a project to look forward to and to work towards is something that has given my life. I'm an actor and I have long stretches of inactivity where I have nothing to do professionally. I have a wonderful family and a wonderful son and wife, and so they give me plenty to do. But in terms of fulfilling an artistic side of my life and having this podcast to look forward to, seeing your name on my calendar for the last week being like, it's 2 days away. It's 1 day away. So all day today I've just been waiting to can I go yet? Is it time? And getting in the car, driving over here, it's very exciting because it's the unknown of what this conversation is going to bring. Seeing my friend, creating this for our community, for our show. So it, like I said, it seems a little like I'm just pandering, but it really is the best part of it.
Oh, happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
God, I can answer that question in a number of different ways. I'm so grateful for the fact that I've become a morning person because I never was before. Ever since like middle school, I hated mornings because I had to get up for school and I was tired and it was carpool and I didn't want to go to school. And then as a musician, I was up late at night, and I always thought of myself as a night owl. And then I was an alcoholic, and of course, the mornings.
Hopefully that takes place at night.
Yeah, well, yeah. When I was drinking heavily, I started sleeping later and later, and I thought this was one of the rationalizations you have as an alcoholic. It's like, well, I don't start drinking until 5 o'clock, but I was sleeping until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So I was like, look out, get up, hungover. It's
like the morning.
I've got 2 or 3 hours to make it. With that history to now like wake up with the sun and like grab a cup of coffee and go outside in beautiful Southern California and smell the fresh air
when it's not 104 degrees yet.
Yeah.
It's 7 a.m.
No, but I make it a ritual every morning to go outside, to get some sunlight, to, just listen to the birds chirping and just feel alive. And I call it coming to my senses, because it's like there's sounds that you can tap into. There's the feeling of the sun on your skin or the wind. There's just the visual element, all of your senses, and that's what allows you to feel present. Yeah. And when you start your day that way, it just anchors you in the present moment in a way that I can carry that into my day. So I consider myself, I'm just very grateful to have that appreciation of that time of day now, because I didn't for the longest time. But I also could say I'm happiest probably when I'm working on a project. In particular, if I'm collaborating with friends on a project. And so when I'm in the midst of something like this, that I'm diving into something with intent to both enjoy myself and to just be engaged in something that's pleasurable in that way, but also that has a purpose, and I'm just striving to make it as good as it can be. It's not every day, but it is now more and more as I have a new project with you, there are those days of the week when it's like, that's what I'm looking forward to. But then I also could just say, when my cat cuddles up to me at night, it's just like the connection that you feel with your pet, which is to me like the simplest and most pure, form of connection and intimacy, is when it's like I have no agenda when I look into my cat's eyes and a cat. You know what I mean? It's just pure love. There's nothing, there's no ego involved. It's just they're enjoying my presence and I'm enjoying theirs. So that's another really wonderful part of my day.
That's sweet.
No, I just read an article about, they were like, why are people sadder when their cats die than when like parents or friends die sometimes? But it's because it's with you all the time and it sees you as yourself and your vulnerable moments, everything, right? And like you said, they don't want anything from you. You don't want anything from them. I just fostered 3 puppies and then 2 cats. So I get it now. Okay. The whole just wanting to go home and have a cuddle and that's it. I will bookend your morning by saying the sunset. I love golden hour, the hour before the sun sets, because the light just makes everything feel romantic and magical and meaningful. And that's when I like to go out and do my big talk interviews too. Because I don't need a setup or anything. I can literally film on my phone. It's gorgeous.
And they look great at that hour.
Everyone looks beautiful too. And every moment feels heightened. Like if you see an old couple walking, you feel like you hear a symphony behind you at golden hour. Just every moment is beautiful. And that's also when I walk down to the ocean and I always ask myself or whoever I'm with, what are you grateful for and what are you looking forward to? And we always do it every day as a ritual. So the sunset is definitely my best moment of my day.
We got the morning, the midday, and the end of the day. That's perfect. We covered the whole day.
Yeah.
If you could change anything about the world or society, what would it be? How can you start today?
That is a big one.
That is a big one. I mean, I don't know if we should jump into that, because it's like, I mean, for me, the reason why that jumped out to me is just because I just have noticed a real commonality between the things that I see individuals suffering with and what I see our society dealing with. And it really comes down to black and white thinking, or like sort of binary, extreme, all or nothing thinking. I see it in my clients every day, and it's at the core of a lot of the things that causes people problems in their life. And then, of course, I mean, I don't have to draw this connection for you probably, but you look at our politics, you look at the way that we are trying to communicate with each other and failing, and it's just we've become more and more polarized. Yeah. And so what's going on, in our culture is very similar to what I see going on within people individually. I don't know.
No. Yeah, black and white thinking, that I think is a reason a lot of people go through issues in the first place, globally and internally. Definitely lack of kindness. I get so upset just when I see someone have road rage. I'm like, why would you be mean when you could choose kindness? So I think, or just when people walk past someone in need, like I try to always have dollar bills in my purse and stuff if I see someone experiencing homelessness. But I think if everyone was just a little bit kinder, like everything would be pretty much solved. So that's that, and how I can start doing it today. Yeah.
I don't think you can be much kinder than you already are. So that's something you got to unlock.
I appreciate it. But yeah, just like what I'm trying to do with Big Talk.
Yeah.
It's like talking to people is how you can start being kind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And my answer is just honestly almost a combination of the two. Like I think about, the polarization is obviously an issue that we all can see very clearly, but even on a much smaller level, like I think about, it sounds dumb, but I think about people who post about their sports teams. And some people post positivity about their sports teams. Other people post negativity again about their rival sports team. And I never got that. Like, I'm a Yankees fan. I grew up a Yankees fan. I don't hate the Red Sox. And I certainly don't hate Red Sox fans. But the people whose vitriol and anger towards the opposing fan base, it's like, that's so much anger that you could just let go of. Like, I hated when guys on the Red Sox beat my team, but it never translated to like, let's go to Fenway and get into a fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's why I feel like it's a combination of the two, where there are times the way that I can contribute to that is there are times when I'll be writing an angry post about something and I go, is this going to do anything but other than make me seem like a rageful idiot? And just delete it. You know what I mean? So like just self-editing a little bit each day and taking out one less like angry or rageful response and maybe replacing it with something a little bit more mindful, a little bit more compassionate.
Yeah.
Maybe could set a trend. I mean, it sounds a little altruistic, but.
No, that's great. It really does take that moment of reset.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then it becomes a habit. And you don't even notice.
It's also smart for social media to have that moment of, let me reread this before I click send. And,
it has gone crazy the past couple of years, especially just all the negative comments on social media posts.
Mm-hmm.
Any insight into that from a therapist point of view, like why people are now extra?
Who are they really commenting on?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a symptom of what we're describing in terms of people are disconnected. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, and they're dealing with it by lashing out in the same way that a child does, when they're upset and, suffering in some way. They usually end up, taking it out on another kid, bullying someone, acting out and throwing a tantrum, whatever it is. It's pretty primal. It's pretty basic. Yeah. It's like, rather than sitting in my, as we say at my clinic, sitting in my emotional dirty diaper, you instead externalize the issue. And so there's two ways that we deal with our problems, internally or externally. Mm-hmm. Boys and men tend to deal with their problems externally, and that could be either positive or negative.
I was just going to say, how do boys to men deal with their problems? Boys to men. Probably sing a song about it, right? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's like more like boys are more likely to go, if they're having issues at home, they're more likely to go onto the to go to school and punch someone, right? Mm-hmm. To act out in that way. Whereas girls, and this is cultural, of course, largely, but they tend to internalize it. They put pressure on themselves and they develop things like eating disorders. And so that's kind of like, obviously speaking very broadly to say it falls along gender lines in that way. But those are just examples in terms of the fact that sometimes we beat ourselves up as a way of trying to cope with something. Other times we literally beat other people up. And so that, to me, is just that. It's just like the schoolyard thing. It's like, well, I'm struggling in some way, and so let me just take it out on someone else. And even better, if it's somebody anonymous that I don't have to look at in the face, I could just do it from my keyboard or from my phone and feel like I got them. And you got your little fix of adrenaline that right when you're pressing send, I'm sure you're like, oh, yeah, I got him. I got him. And it's like, well, what did you really achieve? You just kind of got a little bit of a dopamine hit.
A good friend of mine and a mental health advocate author named Allie Larkin, who sent me an article the other day just talking about this exact thing that was like, it's called the throwing your toys corollary, where it's like, as children, they just get angry and throw their toys. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't even really make them feel better, but it's just this instinctive response to, I'm unhappy about this, I'm going to throw the toy. And we do that in our lives, where we might even do self-destructive behavior or things that might come back to bite us, like a social media post, that doesn't do anything to improve our situation. All it does is make us feel good in that moment to just throw the toys. You know, imagine it's just a good metaphor that I like that I've just heard, and now it applies perfectly to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did we do all three?
No, I'm still waiting.
I got you. These are both like lighter ones.
Good. I think after that.
Yeah, sorry. I gravitate to the heavy stuff.
Well, that's why I have a range in here. Let's get to cover the whole spectrum. Okay, if you could live anywhere else for a year, where would you go and what would you do there? And the answer can't be working on this podcast or on your brand or anything like that.
We can do it remotely.
It has to be something like, different.
Yeah.
Non-work related.
I would love for my family and I to spend a year in the woods somewhere, or just away from life and the speed of life, whether that's in the hills of France or whether it's in Hawaii or, just somewhere where the pace slows down. Ryan and I, we've spoken about Hawaii once or twice. And then again, I remember the first time. Hawaii. I've only been once.
We can all go.
But I think the advice I think you gave me was that the second you step off the plane, you feel the pace. You feel it. And I did. And I was like, oh, this is, you just melt into the runway of the airport. And I want that feeling for my family and I. We live in Los Angeles. It's fast paced. And my son is an actor and he wants to be a part of this industry, which is great. But it's stressful. My wife's in it as well. And I would love for us to take a year and go, let's just worry about collecting the eggs in the morning from the chickens that we have, or the trees that are so tall we can't even see. You know what I mean? Like that would be a nice escape for me.
Would you do it?
I think so. Yeah. Absolutely. My dream is to work on a movie that has to shoot for 6 months in New Zealand, and I take the whole family and we just live there. And
I see that for you.
That's an excuse to go there. You know what I mean? As opposed to just picking up and leaving. But to have a reason to get out of the city and just live this kind of slow-paced, relaxed, get up with the sun.
Yeah.
Even I could become a morning person in that setting.
Yeah.
Kalina, you've said that Hawaii is like almost an identity for you, right?
It's my happy place.
Yeah.
I resonate with everything you said. Agreed. There I can get up with the sun. There's something about tropical islands where you're away from the mainland and everything that everyone else cares about. Like, I don't read the news when I'm in Hawaii.
Right.
I just live day to day and ask my body what it wants to do that day.
That's nice.
So, yes, I feel very connected to Hawaii.
Well, I grew up on the East Coast, and we didn't hear about Hawaii. We went to Florida. Right. Florida's very different energy, especially different nowadays. But back then it was like, go to Florida, like get a coconut, but then I went to Hawaii and I was like, oh, this is a different animal altogether. So,
I think I probably would have answered that question in very different ways at different times in my life. And I'm kind of just thinking about where I'm at now with that, because when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed that question at all, because I was such I would get homesick when I traveled a lot just from an early age. And I always wanted to be home. But then after I left the band and I wasn't traveling anymore, then I had a yearning to travel for the first time. And I did. And I took like yearly trips to Europe mostly. And I did have fantasies of London in particular. Stockholm, Sweden is an incredible city. There's a couple other places in Europe that I was like, I could see myself living here for like a year or more. Like I could see myself moving here. So I've had those fantasies. But then in my darkest times, I think I was like, where is it culturally appropriate to drink a lot?
Here we come, Vegas.
Well, like Eastern Europe, Russia.
I don't think anyone has ever answered that question with Russia.
I really like to move to the Eastern Bloc.
But now, of course, I'm in a very different place. And I have been sort of much more connected to the idea of nature.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could commit to the rest of my life in a place that's that disconnected from the pace of city life.
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, would I be happy for a year, like by a lake in the mountains with fresh air? And I think that if I were working on something while I was there, I think, okay, there's the answer. I would write a book.
There you go.
In a lake house, where every day I'd wake up with a cup of coffee on the little porch overlooking a lake and go for a hike in the woods and then go sit at my computer with that view and write about like that. I could see myself really enjoying.
And there could be a magical mailbox where Cameron Diaz is writing you letters from the past. Am I confusing this with another?
Was it Cameron?
I don't know.
The Lake House?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Kate. I don't know. It was a
one
Kate.
of those.
One of the Kates.
That sounds great. You should do your second book like that.
That's I'm trying to imagine how that would actually work out, especially if we're doing all this other stuff. But
you could go back and forth.
Yeah. From Hawaii to your lake house in New Zealand where I'm filming a movie.
This past January, I went to Costa Rica and stayed at an animal rescue for a week. And that got me on my animal kick. And I ended up fostering puppies and cats, like I said. So somewhere that's really wild and maybe there's a nature preserve. I've been keen on Western Australia, but I haven't been there because they have whale sharks. And it's like the friendliest shark. And they look like constellations.
The largest fish.
So something like that, like working with animals. I think I was like listening to a podcast of this guy who like lived in Belize, like working with jaguars for a year. Something like that would be super cool. I need to like think closely about the place and the animal, but that'd be a cool experience.
It's funny that all three of the Los Angeles residents are like, let's move to the country.
Yeah.
All of us get out of this city.
Well, you just were engaged, right?
Yes, in Hawaii.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So do you know yet, like honeymoon, where you're going to go, that kind of thing?
Well, we were talking about Western Australia or Tahiti or Fiji for those purposes, like wild nature, surfing, animals. So something like that.
Nice.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Not the usual, like Europe.
I can ask this.
Okay.
So in terms of Big Talk, where can people find, obviously they can buy the cards, but where can they find out more about the program, the movement, as we've now branded it?
Yeah. Well, my website and my Instagram are just Make Big Talk. So makebigtalk.com or @makebigtalk.
Are you pursuing this show in any tangible way, or is it something just a dream?
I'm working with a woman who's my friend, like you guys, on a pitch deck because she sold a show to Amazon once. But who knows where that could lead.
Hey.
10 years ago, I actually did get a deal, and then that department at Disney dismantled. And then I started doing other stuff. I moved to Singapore. So I want it to like either come right after the book or at around the same time. So it is something I would like to pursue pretty avidly this summer. It's my goal.
Do you know what the book is already, or is this something you did? Okay.
I don't know the entire contents of it. It will require a lot of research and reflection and thinking. But it's going to be like a how to make big talk book. So kind of like a guide to how to have these kinds of conversations with people from all walks of life and in different areas of your own life. With little, like, trying to think of a reference. Like that book that was so popular in like the 1920s, How to Win Friends and Influence People, something like that.
Okay.
Where it's really approachable, actionable tips for how to make big talk.
Are you going to bring any of yourself into it, or is it mostly just,
I'll bring anecdotes from my experiences, having conversations with different people. And then I'll go into research, I'll go into media, and then each chapter will have a activity sheet of like, here are some things you can do this week, or here are some questions you can ask someone, here are questions you can ask yourself.
Having written these cards yourself, and obviously probably poured over them many times to fine tune them, are there any specific questions in here that you can remember that really resonate with you in terms of like, I find this one is the most important one. Like at any time anybody gets to this card or this question, we have the most revealing answers and things like that. Is there any one that you're like, this is the one that really, really solidified the concept?
No, I mean, it's funny you ask that because I feel like such different questions resonate with different people.
Really?
Like there are questions that people pick it up and they burst into tears, but other people it wouldn't. Like there was one that was, what would your childhood self think about you today? And like this woman just started crying as soon as she read that question aloud. Whereas I wouldn't cry if I read that question. Like the most simple question that I love asking at work events or parties is just, what are you curious about lately? Because that's a really great way to sidestep the small talk and just find out what's top of people's minds, what they're working on, what they're passionate about. And then I mentioned the other one, like what's the most difficult experience you've been through in life and how'd you get through it? When someone is, able to have that kind of conversation with you, that's always powerful.
I was surprised when I saw that you were the one that says, why didn't your father love you? I thought that was really mean. I didn't want to choose that one, but she didn't really write that.
I do have one about parents,
I'm sure you do.
but I do angle all the questions to be positive.
Good.
So like, that's something I really try with this, like, you know, what was the most difficult experience, but how did you get through it? So every question has a hero's moment in it.
Oh, that's nice.
So everyone can be the hero of their own story.
Well, that reminds me, your parents are divorced, right?
Yeah.
That must have been a difficult time for you.
Yeah.
How young were you when?
I was 16. My parents were divorced. I remember my grandparent died, and I just went through my first big breakup. So it was a very moody time.
How'd you get through it?
How did I get through it? I mean, what I was saying before, focusing on superficial things, I think, at that time, not processing it. Instead, just caring about parties, boys, and my friends. And on a deeper level, like always trying to be the glue between my parents. Like I would always make time for both, and I still do. Like it's been great. Like this was my birthday this past week, and I I have a dinner with my dad, a dinner with my mom, dinner with my friends, dinner with my fiance. So it's great. I get to celebrate a lot more things as a result, and go on more trips. Like this past year, I went to Hawaii with my mom and Nashville with my dad for Passover. So I just I try to think of it in a positive way. Like now I have more relationships and life and experiences.
The arts that you talk about, is that a place that you go to grapple with heavier things, or is that another place of light for you?
It's a good question. I think it used to be more melancholy and dark with the things I would write or paint. And then either I've suppressed it or I just don't have anything dark.
You're not a moody teenager anymore.
I'm not a moody teenager. But I used to draw like kind of really moody things and scenes. But now that's like, it's not there. It'd be good to like try to experiment, bring it back a little bit. I just don't even know how to access it anymore.
Okay.
And I think that's probably why it comes out later at night.
That's a good insight.
This is like a therapy session.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Now we're just getting to the good stuff right at the end.
Yeah.
The arts for me, I wasn't really an artistic kid until I discovered like heavy music.
Yeah.
And then that was a place for me where I could sort of plumb the depths of my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I'd certainly think that if I didn't have Kurt Cobain and Chris Cornell in my life when I was 14, 15 years old, I would have been probably more miserable than I was, because that was one place that I felt seen and I could connect with.
If Kurt Cobain didn't exist, we would be forced to create him.
Yeah.
Didn't Jung say that?
Exactly. That's just like an age-old question for me with the arts in general, because I find myself now, it's like when I listen to that music, I connect to it, but it definitely takes me to a place that I'm like, well, I don't want to live here. And so I find myself putting on music that is light and kind of fun and happy and just has a good beat and a good melody, because I'm like, well, that lifts me up. And but then at the same time, I was like, well, is that avoidance? Is that escape from something that is heavy that I need to deal with? And so which purpose are the arts better served to tap into the parts that I really do need to grapple with and to play that out, or to lift me out of them?
No, it's a really good question. And I definitely feel like I am avoided, but I don't mind it, because like I'd rather just be happy. And like, I mean, I'm sure I could unlock something by dealing with the darkness, but I feel like I kind of already been there, done that, you know?
Yeah.
And like now it's like, why not just choose light, positivity, helping others, nature, animals, healthy food, you know, things that like little girls love, and like, why not focus on that? Because I know what depression feels like. I know what grief feels like. And I know I'll have that in the future. Like death is unavoidable, and I'm going to experience that kind of pain later, but it doesn't have to be darkness. Like grief and sadness is different than darkness. And I wouldn't really wish darkness upon anyone, at least not in the sense of the way I'm thinking about it. I mean, there's a reason we have night and day, yin and yang, but it's how it affects you. So maybe it's just a personal choice that I suppress it.
Well, I support it. We tried our darndest today to try to find the darkness inside of it.
Yeah.
It's either buried too deep or just not there.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's there. It's in my dreams every night. So it's there very much, but it's hard to get it. I don't know.
No, I think it's admirable. And like you say, why choose road rage when you can just choose to, okay, you know what I mean? Like, why would you make the conscious choice to let that part in if you didn't need to? If it's not going to serve any purpose other than throwing your toys, then just choose animals and sunsets. Right. You know,
it's science that's helping others. Like makes you happier. So why not just do a service to others and to yourself? Like, what's the point of choosing the opposite? You know?
why choose distraction?
You keep it real simple. And you know what? I think you may be the happiest person on earth.
That cannot be true.
And I admire that.
And if you too want to be happy, pick up your record.
Well, it's been absolutely enlightening and just a lot of fun to engage in this way today. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks, guys.
I'm definitely going to get a copy of Big Talk.
I brought 2.
My son's going to love it. He loves games.
How old is your son?
He's 10.
Oh boy, okay, I hope he likes it.
This is like, he might as well have created this. He loves games that are like, there is no winner, there's no loser. It's just answers. He loves games where you guess who would be the most likely to, and things like that. He will live for this game.
You should ask him. I don't know if I have a bullet card, but you should ask him to come up with some of his own questions too, and like write them and put them in the deck.
We'll put them in the comments on the YouTube video of this episode, and you can answer.
That'd be awesome. I love hearing kids' responses to Big Talk, especially because they keep it so real. They don't like think about how your answer will be perceived to others first before just answering. Like 6-year-olds are the best Big Talkers ever. And profound.
All right, Kalina Silverman, thank you so much for being a guest. This has been another episode of the Hard to Breathe podcast. Join us next time again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.